become part of the unviolent army. We are often told that resistance is either unwarranted or impossible. Liberal apologists for Israel, such as Thomas Friedman, are constantly demanding that Palestinians lay down their arms, all the while exhorting Israelis to pick them up in ever-increasing acts of violence and degradation. When faced with violence in our world, our elites tell us that we have two, and only two, choices: capitulate to the violence, or go to war. Of course, which of these two choices is the right and proper course of action depends on who you are. Faced with Palestinian violence, Israelis must, rightly and properly, go to war. Faced with Israeli violence, Palestinians must, rightly and properly, capitulate. In Tel Aviv and Washington D.C. this is called moral clarity, the supposed necessity of pursuing Israeli security through deliberately creating massive insecurity among Palestinians. This is lunacy. But even mainstream peace movements in the West try to delegitimize resistance by calling on both Palestinians and Israelis to renounce overt acts of violence, equating Palestinians who commit suicide bombings with Israelis who send F-16s, D-9 military bulldozers, and Apache attack helicopters to level entire neighborhoods. The problem is that the usually random and individual acts of violence by Palestinians against Israelis are not equal to the myriad structural oppressions and cruelties imposed on Palestinians through Israeli government policies. No Palestinian fighter jets bomb Israeli cities because Palestine has no fighter jets. No Palestinian bulldozers demolish Israeli homes because Palestine has no military bulldozers. No Palestinian soldiers invade Israeli neighborhoods, terrorizing the populace, because there is no Palestinian army. The conflict in Palestine is a war of Israeli state terror against a largely unarmed and defenseless civilian population. Even immoral and self-defeating acts of violence against Israeli civilians, such as some suicide bombings are, cannot be equated with the daily humiliations, terror, and death that Israel inflicts on Palestinians by deliberate policy. Contrary to its presentation in the mainstream media, this conflict is neither a righteous war against evil Arab terrorists, nor a religious or ethnic dispute between two opposing, and equally self-justified groups of people. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a struggle of two irreconcilable and unequal causes, the struggle of an oppressed people for freedom, justice, and self-determination against their oppressors' struggle to maintain, and even expand, their domination. Under these circumstances, resistance is not only a right, it's a moral imperative. With respect, just because some people have chosen to remain ignorant of the long and deep history of Palestinian non-violent resistance, from the 1936 boycott to bill and today, does not mean that it does not exist. The Free Gaza movement struggles in solidarity with an already vibrant Palestinian civil resistance. Similarly, the other criticism of resistance, that it is futile, is equally mistaken. There is a widespread delusion among many that Israel and the Israeli lobby are simply too powerful to be challenged, let alone defeated. This is not the case. On June 30, 2009, IR forcibly boarded one of our boats, the Spirit of Humanity, and kidnapped 21 human rights workers and journalists who were on their way to deliver much-needed humanitarian and reconstruction supplies to besieged Gaza, including Nobel Peace Prize laureate Merritt Maguire and former US Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. They were held in jail for a week before being deported. Though we were stopped on this particular voyage, it was not a failure. In the month after our boat was hijacked, over 100,000 news stories, essays, blog entries, action alerts, and radio and television segments were made on Israel's violent response to our mission. It's true that the ordeal of our 21 volunteers pales in comparison to the 11,000 Palestinian political prisoners held in Israeli prisons. The seizure of our small cargo of 3 tons of medical aid and reconstruction kits is insignificant in light of the $4 billion USD of aid promised to Gaza, aid that has not and will not be delivered because of the Israeli blockade. But that too misses the point. By choosing to violently confront and kidnap unarmed human rights workers on a mission of mercy, Israel publicly demonstrated both the illegality and the absurdity of the Gaza siege. The siege is abjectly not about security. No one could possibly have believed that our small boat was a physical threat to Israel. This public demonstration of the siege's illegality resulted in record action at the governmental level as well. Both the Irish and Greek governments formally intervened to protect their citizens and property. Despite having no diplomatic relationship and refusing to recognize the legitimacy of Israel's government, the King of Bahrain personally and successfully intervened to force Israel to immediately release the 5 Bahraini human rights workers kidnapped from the Spirit. The British Parliament held a formal debate on the issue, and even the US State Department was forced to hold a national conference call on for family and friends of the kidnapped victims, as well as for Arab American civil rights groups. This was unprecedented, but it's not enough. The Free Gaza movement started our small part in this struggle in 2006. We began on hope alone. Many thought it couldn't be done, but we did it. We broke through the Israeli blockade. We will sail again, and we are absolutely determined to reach the Gaza Strip on our next voyage. We intend to non-violently escalate our response. By sending a cargo ship, we will escalate the challenge to the blockade by bringing in significant amounts of boundary construction materials. By sending more boats on our next mission, we will significantly escalate the logistical difficulties Israel faces should they decide to violently attack us again. By sending even more parliamentarians, dignitaries, journalists, and human rights workers to accompany the boats, we will significantly escalate the political difficulties Israel faces should they decide to violently attack us again. The journey to Gaza is dangerous. The Israeli Navy rammed our flagship, the Dignity, when we attempted to deliver medical supplies to Gaza during their vicious assault in December/January. In June, they hijacked our small boat and kidnapped everyone on board. Israel has even threatened to open fire on our unarmed ships, rather than allow us to deliver humanitarian and reconstruction supplies to the people of Gaza. But the risks we take on our voyages are insignificant compared to the risks imposed every day upon the people of Gaza. The purpose of nonviolent direct action and civil resistance is to take risks, to put ourselves in the way of injustice. We take these risks well aware of what the possible consequences may be. We do so because the consequences of doing nothing are so much worse. Any time we allow ourselves to be bullied, every time we pass by an evil and ignore it, we lower our standards and allow our world to be made that much harsher and unjust for us all. Israel can threaten our boats and passengers. We will keep going. Israel can illegally disrupt our communications and navigation systems, and we will keep going. Israel can open fire around our boats, or attempt to ram and sink them. Israel can choose to forcibly board and hijack our boats and abduct our volunteers. It doesn't matter. We will keep going. Armed only with the love of justice and in the right of resistance, we will go to Gaza again and again and again, until this siege is forever shattered and the people of Gaza have free access to the rest of the world. Chapter 21. The Freedom Flotilla, escalating our efforts, turning concepts into reality.